From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
My name is Noel.
They call me Ben. We're joined as always with our super producer Dylan, the Tennessee pal Fagan. Most importantly, you are you. You are here. That makes this the stuff they don't want you to know, hurtling headlong through April. We wish you the best with your paperwork. I feel like everybody has to deal with paperwork at this point, no matter who you are.
Guys, would you believe I've already done my taxes? I did them like right away, the moment I got my W-2. I feel like such an adult.
Yeah, you were telling me that. That's awesome.
Well, you know, I mean, I'm not bragging. It's just, for me, it's a big deal.
Did you get to write off any medical expenses?
No, I did not. No. I wrote off a lot of modular synthesizer equipment, though. Don't tell Uncle Sam. No, I do use that for business. But yeah, how does that even work, guys? Like, I don't think I even knew that you could do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can. You just have to out-receipt the other people. It's a war of paperwork attrition, getting your documentation right in the right place, always having the thing when it's asked for in the format it is requested. This leads us to a fascinating conversation we had back in October of 2024 with our conspiracy realist K-Dog. K-Dog, you said something that stood out to all of us, and K-Dog and I had a bit of a correspondence over this. The U.S. healthcare system is, diplomatically put, complicated. Supporters are going to say it's imperfect, but, you know, it's better than nothing. And critics, by which we mean the majority of the U.S. population, will say, it's worse than not great. It can be predatory at times. It is not near the level of other developed countries. Like right now, as we record, millions of people are attempting to get possibly life-saving medications, procedures, and surgery.
Yeah, the rest of the world says, why can't you provide that? Don't you guys make a lot of money?
Why is it a crapshoot that you might get like acceptable healthcare? It just seems kind of like a lot of people in the rest of the world look at that as a human right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because it is. So we're coming in here with a bit of a bias, but this is the quick skinny, folks. Here in the United States, patients and doctors can't immediately agree that a procedure is life-saving, right? Outside of maybe an emergency room, doctors have to get prior approval from private health insurers to cover part of a medical cost.
Because they're the ones paying for it, right?
Sure.
And who, by the way, are not themselves medical professionals and who are making assessments based on dollars and cents, not necessarily, you know, the well-being of the patient.
We're going to talk about that because that's why one of the value adds of one of the corporations we're going to be talking about is we use doctors, and we have doctors because doctors have to make those decisions.
Right. This leads us to the story, K-Dog, that you suggested not too long ago, back in October of 2024. This is the tale of EviCore. EvilCore.
Did nobody not notice or like let them know that this is one letter away from being EvilCore, which sounds like an incredible genre of metal.
It's a great parody account on Twitter.
I think it's Evacore.
Evacore. Well, you know what? We'll give them the measure of respect they deserve. EviCore. Here are the facts. Okay, for anybody unaware, guys, could we explain what prior approval is? Like, what does it mean?
It's authorization by a medical professional that says, hey, this procedure, this medication, this whatever it is medically necessary for this patient. That's what a prior authorization is. Before the surgery happens, before the MRI test, before the certain exam, name it, that an oncologist would perform, before your heart gets checked out or you get a catheter in there to make sure
before you get medication.
Yes, any of that. It's a group of people saying, yes, this is necessary before anybody takes on any further costs.
Yeah, and additionally to this important note, this is evaluated. Part of this is not just whether it's medically necessary, but whether it is specifically covered by whatever hierarchy of plan you have.
Yes.
So even if you definitely need that kidney and you don't have the right plan, you may not get approved, meaning that you would be theoretically responsible for the entirety of that bill.
Well, it's another reason too that it's really, really difficult to get certain experimental treatments covered. And you always hear about, people that have cancer and that maybe there's this, cutting edge treatment that's being used. That's the kind of stuff, or to get the top person, that's the kind of stuff that almost always has to be paid out of pocket and can bankrupt people, or at the very least cause them to carry massive, massive debt.
I agree. I think one of the things we have to address at the top here is that most medical plans, no matter who's providing them, will state somewhere within the massive documentation you have to sign that medically necessary things they won't be fully paid for, but depending on whatever your contract says, they will be paid for with a certain percentage, right?
Sure. Or after a certain threshold of your payments.
Well, yeah, there's like
Which
all
is
these different things.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it just depends. There's all these different things that can go into it. But ultimately, almost every single one of the healthcare plans that I have seen say within that writing that they will cover medically necessary things, which is why that term, that phrase becomes so important.
Yeah. And also such a foundational stone in the controversy and indeed conspiracy we're discussing here. In theory, the idea of prior approval is used by insurance companies and their health plans and physicians to make sure things are cost effective, that the service is necessary, it's covered. That makes sense. However, we could argue the solution to the second part of covered by your plan could be solved very easily by just getting everyone on the same plan, like so many other developed countries. Story for another day, does need to be mentioned, but in theory, prior approval does mean that drugs and services are going to people who need them.
And which I guess, was sort of the point of the Affordable Health Care Act, but even that in and of itself was like a little not great because it still required, connecting with these private insurance companies that were just in this new network, right?
Yeah, the marketplace.
That's the one, the marketplace. Yeah. So it's still not even close to resembling what other countries have and have had for many, many years. And it's also something that is, for whatever reason, very controversial and seems to be in the process of being shut down, or at least attempted to be.
Yeah, it goes back and forth just because there is so much money here. We have it later in the episode, but maybe one of the things you have to consider now when you're playing along at home, folks, is that as an industry in the United States, healthcare is by far the number one employer. And that is as of March 2025. It went back and forth between that and retail, or even, I guess the Pentagon is technically the largest single entity employer, but
not anymore.
Well, healthcare industry. It's all the other companies. Oh no, God, I haven't even thought about all the stuff that's going to happen. RIP to the stock market, by the way. I guess there was no prior approval on whatever surgery was needed for that one.
The patient's just suffering for a minute, and then it's going to heal. Everything's going to be fine. But to be fair, y'all, we've seen corrections before. We've seen, recessions before. I'm not trying to diminish what's going on, but I'm also really trying not to be utterly doom about it.
Cool. That's good.
Hey, look, it's a mental health thing, guys.
Call
it willful self-deception if you must, but this is where I land.
I had one of those moments where I said, you know what? I'm just not going to look at anything like a 401k until 2029.
Exactly.
If we make it.
Exactly.
So let's also just state here, most of what we're talking about, if not everything we're talking about right now, have to do with insurance companies. So all the patients to the provider to the insurance company. And the insurance company is the most important thing. These are private entities that are for-profit entities, right? There are other medical plans that you may find yourself getting if, let's say, you were formerly a member of the military.
Sure.
If you don't reach a certain level of income on a yearly basis, you could be a part of a federal or a state like Medicare system.
Medicaid, etc.
That they function very differently than the ways we're talking about this whole system. They're still attempting to cost cut, right? And get some savings wherever they can, but those systems are much less likely to have this type of system in play with the denials we're going to be talking about today.
Right. Especially the rate of attrition here, which is going to be key. Now, we gave the theoretical defenses, right? And God knows nobody wants an innocent person to die because somehow the medicine that they should have gotten has been, funneled off to someone who doesn't need it. Everybody agrees on that point, but is it not an argument of convenience? Because in practice, prior approval gets super dicey. We'll talk about the rules and criteria. And before we do that, we have to establish this is a hodgepodge of incongruous, sometimes conflicting bureaucratic regimes. States have their own different laws regulating the process and what indeed should even be reported about the process. And the most important thing, I feel like we get lost in the banality of evil here, but the most important thing to remember when folks are navigating this arcane system is that there is often a ticking clock involved. Not getting a medicine, not getting a procedure or treatment can lead to disaster. It is not as if your failing kidney is going to wait on your insurance company's paperwork. You know what I mean? You can't tell a bodily function or an organ of yours that you didn't fill out form XYZ correctly. Yeah. The heart's not going to go, oh yeah, okay, well, I'll keep ticking along for 90 days.
That is a great point, Ben, because it is human beings that are potentially on the brink of death or, extreme
duress,
illness or pain.
Yes.
Right. And as we found out last year, sometimes that denied back surgery could lead to a homicide. So,
right.
we're learning.
Luigi Mangio.
We're learning that the stakes couldn't be higher here.
Mm-hmm. And I really appreciate that because that foreshadowing is one of the crucial, mission-critical, larger contexts that I want us to get to at the end, because this occurs in situ with this stuff, in media res. What is medically necessary, quote unquote? If you ask most insurance companies or insurance company adjacent things, they will say medically necessary means that when a doctor tells us or puts in a request for insurance to cover this thing, private insurance, then we have to know for sure that the recommended treatment from the physician is proven to be the best current approach based on the most current verified research. Again,
and also that there's not a cheaper alternative that will have, quote, the same outcome.
Right. They want to make sure something's not getting duplicated. And that can happen if you're seeing multiple specialists, right? One specialist requests an X-ray, another one requests an X-ray. So an insurance company will say, hey, we've already got an X-ray. The economical option, or what we call lowballing, it occurs when, just simply put, there are a couple of drugs that could treat a condition or a specific aspect of a condition. Your doctor, for one reason or another, recommends one that is more expensive. The insurance company will then ask your physician, why can't you just go with the less expensive version? That's not an automatic denial, but that does mean your doctor, who's already very busy, has to justify why the more expensive option is better, right? Is it because the pharmaceutical reps bribed them? Is it? It's
which is a potential thing,
it's
right?
Partially, yeah, it's possible.
But then you create a situation where that physician has to spend hours on the computer typing up the reasoning behind something, right? That they just, as the physician and as a care provider, said, hey, this is what needs to happen.
Right. And you can appeal these denials. You can resubmit paperwork. A lot of times it's the bureaucracy that gets people. You might have some kind of other quite innocuous error. So if you ever get denied for one of these prior approval requests, the first move you and your physician's team are going to make is to try again, right? And there are cases where someone got denied for something twice, thrice, only to get approved the third or the fourth time. It, for a long time, a huge issue with this was that these, just like how the laws go state by state, each private insurance company in the United States had their own different systems, their own kind of formatting for things, their own kind of reasoning behind how we evaluate medical necessity. So what flew with like I'm just making stuff up, but like what flew with, Quesadilla United might not fly with Shoe Feed Incorporated.
Well, and I don't know, it's just kind of mind-boggling that it's not more standardized. And it just really points to the problem of how having all of these separate entities kind of making their own rules without much cohesion between them really is tough when it comes to like human health and human life and well-being and just being treated humanely, because so much of it feels like a crapshoot. The idea of getting approved the third or fourth time. Why?
Well, we'll get into it. But I think the real problem is that each of these entities is looking at the bottom line. And each of these entities, especially at the very top with the private insurers, are trying to make sure the total revenues for that year or that quarter are higher than the ones that they were before.
Yeah. You could also argue that their primary patients are the shareholders.
Which is just wild. I'm sorry. I mean, I don't want to sound naive. It's just, I know this is how capitalism works. But when you have such a capitalist, philosophy behind something as important as like saving human lives, it's just, it's wild.
It makes you wonder what the American Medical Association is for, besides lobbying, I guess.
Or the many other related medical associations. I love what you were saying there, Noel. The idea of this massive discrepancy, these competing, sometimes contradictory systems. There's a solution. Dylan, if we could get some fanfare, perfect.
Sweet.
What about large-scale automation, courtesy of companies like
EviCore?
Right. The idea is uniformizing the approval process. Supporters will say, look, this saves cost. It cuts confusion. Overall, while imperfect, it is a better system. However, critics will say this system is purposely, brutally designed to deny as much coverage as possible, accelerating profits while, endangering or even ending human lives.
And we'll get into more about how that happens after a quick word from our sponsor.
Here's where it gets crazy. All right, EviCore, EviCore, however you would like to say.
They say Evacore on their corporate video.
All right. Well, we're giving them the respect they're due. So EviCore is founded in the early 1990s. It's a medical imaging company, the kind of folks who work with CAT scans and x-rays and stuff. This is 1992. And it goes through several different headquarters, like back and forth from South Carolina, Florida, et cetera. It goes through acquisitions. There's a merger in 2014, and the product of the merger is ultimately acquired by the gigantic company Cigna in 2018. And so now this is unnecessarily complicated, right? This company operates through Evacore, operates under Cigna with relative autonomy because they operate under another subsidiary of Cigna called EverNorth. So it's Petroshka dolls, right? And that's partially to help out with accounting, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, it's really fun to go through those companies and then just see what all the mission statements are for the companies as you imagine going down and parsing the mission into a sharper thing, I guess, as you get through EverNorth, through Cigna to EverNorth to Evacore.
Beautiful
which is
dance of euphemisms.
Oh yeah, which is now in Franklin, Tennessee, everybody.
Yeah.
Headquartered.
Tell them we said hi. So Evacore's best known thing the platform we're talking about tonight, along with 38 other huge clients of theirs, is something called Intellipath. Intellipath, which sounds like a weirdly specific superhero power. I'm not a telepath, I'm an Intellipath.
That's funny.
It's terrible.
I only read smart people's minds.
There we go. We got there. But the idea is that this proprietary platform can get things approved faster, can at least get decisions made faster, reducing the burnout of doctors. Overall, their argument is this makes things more efficient and less stressful for everybody, including patients on the ground who already pay these insurance companies a ton of money.
Well, and you could certainly argue or see the merit in something like this. It all just depends on the rubric that it's using, and which side it favor and which ultimate outcome is prioritized for the folks programming the platform, or at the very least nudging it in whichever direction.
What's the dial? Yeah.
We're going to learn about the dang dial. But if you want to put yourself in, maybe you're not a medical provider or a physician, but if you want to put yourself in the shoes of somebody, let's say you're a doctor that you go and see on a regular basis, Evacore on their website has a nice little pre-authorization, or they call it prior authorization checklist, where you can see just all the things you need to do as a provider to provide to this thing that we're talking about, this automated service, and then all of the different steps you need to take as that physician just to get a single prior authorization done. And it is, from my eyes, it's infuriating the amount of busy work that somebody has to do to make one surgery happen.
Which is why there are entire small armies of support staff who have to walk through this stuff, and keep in mind, again, make no mistake, we are talking about potentially life-saving services. Now, Evacore can't get in too much trouble for this as an insurer, because it is not itself a direct insurer. It is a third party. Your insurance companies are outsourcing these approval decisions to companies like EviCore or Evacore. And these clients, it might sound small when you hear these folks say, hey, we started with like 3 clients, and now we have 38. But those clients, each one, they comprise some of the biggest insurance companies in the United States. So as a result, the partially automated approval decisions from this company, this outsourced third party, they affect around 100 million people in this country as of last year. That is about 1 in 3 Americans with insurance.
Yep. So if you've got, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Aetna, United Healthcare, or even some Medicare or some Medicaid groups use this service.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, and this did not come out of someone's fever dream one night. This is the culmination of a massive multi-decades long campaign by existing insurance companies, because they looked around and they saw some studies that are, again, sort of convenient. And they said, these healthcare costs are exploding. Look at all these people getting over treatment. That's the euphemism.
Yeah.
Over treatment.
That's not healthcare costs for you and me and us and the human beings. That's healthcare costs for healthcare corporations.
That's right. And again, though, I mean, like this centralized platform that we're talking about, it would, if used kind of more humanely, I guess, be the thing we were saying maybe needed to happen, some sort of standardization between these companies. But what it's trying to do is just not, it's exactly the opposite of what we want, right?
It's so weird, because the idea is that this company, you're an insurance company, you outsource, you sign one of 2 types of contracts with this company. And as a result, they will somewhat automate the decisions, or they'll offload the decision-making process from your company. They specialize, Evacore specializes in expensive or niche procedures and recommendations. So oncology, gastroenterology, sleep problems, a baker's dozen of other specialized fields like cardiology, of course. And the idea is kind of what you were describing there, Noel, that this proprietary platform, Intellipath, streamlines everything in a single application. It manages requests, clinical surveys, and it gives you real-time decisions. That real-time decision aspect is a game changer, especially when we're talking about time-sensitive stuff, especially if those requests get approved. And that's the problem. We can't thank, again, KDOG and our pals at ProPublica and Capital Forum. We can't thank them enough for the fantastic work they published in October of last year. It's a long read, but everyone should check it out.
It's huge, yes, but dang, is it intense? You can find it everywhere. I think CNN even reposted it when it.
Yeah, like word for word.
Yeah, exactly. It was a couple other places that are big publications put it out because it is that important.
Yeah, and they're saying they're saying what we've been sort of saying here at the top. Their investigation indicates that this company and companies like it, there are more than one in the game. They may be incentivized by more than just efficiency. They may be pursuing profits for clients by increasing rates of denial and doing so knowingly. And they don't even call it denial. They call it inappropriate care determination.
Inappropriate, y'all.
Yeah.
Say it ain't so, guys.
We talked about overtreatment, but Ben, I think we skipped over the actual stats there of what is stated by the health insurers and like why they're looking for this service. Can we just hit those real quick?
Yeah, they said something, the overtreatment rationalization, right, from the insurance companies are a handful of studies that, if you read them, are a little bit dodgy. We're not experts, but they're a little dodgy. They're claiming that 20 to 45% of certain medical treatments are ineffective, wasteful, or unnecessary. 45% is a really high number, especially considering that the people making these requests have gone to medical school forever, dude.
Yeah. Well, and just this concept that, we checked out patient A's heart because patient A was complaining of, heart issues. These are symptoms that someone who might have a heart attack soon would have. So we checked out his heart. Is that wasteful? Is that unnecessary because he wasn't actively having a heart attack?
Right. We talked about that too, like that's such a devilish thing, how one defines necessity, right? Someone's blood work comes back, right? Indicative of a possibly serious symptom. It's the sort of thing that as a physician, you are ethically required to look into. It is your job to do that. And instead, their insurer comes to you and says, well, this is going to be unnecessary. Or a few years ago, people did these blood tests and this percentage of people did not in fact have that dangerous condition. So roll the dice, right? Pick a card.
Yeah.
Because it's probably not going to be the dangerous one. Request denied. Stamp. Like denied stamp sound. Thank you.
I'm hearing it.
No, already you can see how it feels like betting on human lives. Already. Yeah. And we haven't even gotten to the details yet.
No, we got to talk about the dial. All right. This is the partially AI-powered algorithm that makes the initial call. Your doctor, someone comes in and they say, I'm having shortness of breath. I'm having, maybe like fugue states, something like that, or heart palpitations. And you put in a request for some stuff. This AI-powered algorithm is not a set in stone system, the thing that replies. It's referred to the dial because it can be adjusted. I want to be careful how we say this. It can be adjusted in a way that in practice raises rates of denial.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. And specifically that has to do with the type of contract Evacore ends up signing with whatever insurer or other entity, right? Mm-hmm. Because Ben, you mentioned there's at least two types of contracts. One of them is like the general, we are going to handle your prior authorizations through our system. Then we'll just do the whole thing of back and forth if we need to appeal. The other one that you talked about, there's a great example within that ProPublica article of, I'll read directly from the article. You can check it out if you want. The title of it is not medically necessary. You can just look that up probably and find it. ProPublica, you'll find it.
And is it okay if I shout out the authors there?
Oh yeah, there's several.
Yeah, because this is like a posse track. So we're talking about T. Christian Miller from ProPublica, Patrick Rucker from the Capitol Forum, and David Armstrong, also of ProPublica.
Journalism,
exactly. Yeah. So this is a direct quote from that. They're talking about these known risk contracts, which is a separate type of contract. They say, as an example, say an insurer spends around $10 million a year on MRIs. If Evacore keeps costs below $10 million per year on MRIs, Evacore as a corporation, as an entity, pockets the difference in how much money that insurance company saved on MRIs that year, according to that contract. Or it might split those profits like 50-50, 60-40, something like that, depending on the contract with the health insurance company. So
isn't that like a kickback?
Yes, it's loosely called a risk contract. That's what former employees speaking under anonymity called it.
Betting on futures or something. It's
very much so. I mean, that's the other thing, right? So the argument that there may be incentivization that moves you beyond just efficiency, it goes to, look, the contracts that have been verified by the investigation, they do indicate company profits can be tied, like you were saying, Matt, directly to the amount of cuts made in expenditures. Now, the insurance companies have agency in this. The contracts that they sign can direct this company and others like it toward focusing on certain, not just outcomes, but certain conditions, certain medical conditions. Like, now you're going to be our oncology approval gang, right? And so some folks may argue, hey, this is just a matter of perception, because companies that are baking in this relationship between denials and profits, they might just be trying to get stuff up and running that's better than their own older approval methods. Those may have had a lot of room for error, and a lot of people were working with antiquated paper-based systems.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But to really dial down on it, oh God, sorry, I'm so sorry. That this dial thing that is referenced a ton throughout that investigation, which is essentially the algorithm that we're talking about here, it can be, according to a lot of those insiders, really turned, right? So you could say the insurance company actually needs to save X more percentage on those MRIs or something, and you could adjust how it looks at these prior approval documentation, the documentation for each individual one. And it's talking about how it can deny claims that have like a 95% necessary rating or something.
95% or less likelihood of approval.
Yeah.
And this is, before we get to that, I gotta say, I want us to put the claims of Evacore in context with the claims of critics and the claims of investigators. So you've got it, folks, while you're on the internet, there is a webinar from Evacore, because yes, they have a YouTube channel. Check out ours as well, Conspiracy Stuff Show. So in this video, there's a spokesperson for Evacore who says, who portrays client profits as not the primary goal, but as kind of a Bob Ross style happy accident. And I would love to play a clip here, Dylan, if we could.
Being exposed to things that they don't need to be exposed to unnecessarily. So we are improving the quality of healthcare, the safety of healthcare, and by very happy coincidence, we're also decreasing a significant amount of unnecessary cost.
The line he says I think is really important is, by very happy coincidence, we're also decreasing a significant amount of unnecessary cost. Whoops, says the guy flying the plane. As a side effect of this plane, it turns out it flies.
Brad, Yeah.
And of course, if you want to see that specifically, we're big fans of the titles in Evicore's or EviCore or EvilCore, because I'm not going to give them too much respect. We're a big fan of the titles and their webinars. That comes to us from Retain and Grow Your Self-Funded Business with Effective Utilization Management. 3 years ago.
Yeah. You can also find an update too that they put out pretty recently on their YouTube that has the same kind of language, not quite exactly the same, but search Understanding Evicore's Approach to Patient-Centered Care.
So is this really a happy accident? If you go back to ProPublicans and related investigations, you'll see that what representatives of this company are saying internally does not match what they're saying externally. I'd love for us to go to a quote from ProPublica directly.
Evacore markets itself to insurance companies by promising a 3-to-1 return on investment. That is, for every $1 spent on Evacore, the system, the insurer would pay out $3 less on medical care and other costs. Evacore salespeople have boasted of a 15% increase in denials, according to the investigation, which is based on internal documents, corporate data, and dozens of interviews with former employees, doctors, industry experts, healthcare regulators, and insurance executives.
Yeah.
I mean, y'all, if you took the first part of this lift from the this quote from the article, Evacore markets itself to insurance companies by promising a 3-to-1 return on investment. It sounds like the kind of thing that they would do as a sales pitch. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, 100%.
It's 100% that, yeah. And we know that because former salespeople, I guess legally I can't say they're former salespeople, former employees confirmed this and some very high level ones. We also know some disturbing stats because, again, remember how we were saying earlier, state by state laws change. Some states require denial rates to be a matter of public record. It is crazy that not every state requires that. But with that, armed with that information, we can give you another stat here, pulling from Evicore's own self-produced data. They fully or partially turned down around 20% of all requests for medical care in Arkansas. So 20%, so 1 out of 5 of every request. And for comparison, people in that same state who were in Medicare Advantage, about 7% of their claims would be rejected. So this shows us a big discrepancy between the business as usual and whatever innovations, we could call them, Evicore is bringing to the table. So to understand what's going on, we have to go back to the dial it back to the dial, and maybe take a break for a word from our sponsors and walk through this claim process step by step. What do you guys say? Click, 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 click.
Oh, yeah.
Ew, but yes, we should do it.
Sorry, I sounded too excited. Let's do it.
And we've returned. The dial of denial. I'm not proud of it, but it's there.
It's got a ring to it, that's for sure. It's worse than the Dial of Destiny, I would imagine. Although that movie was apparently quite bad.
Ow, but it is a dial of destiny.
It's true.
It really
That's a good
is.
point.
Yeah, it really is. So, okay, you're a doctor. What's a good name for a doctor? Oh, Dr. Spachuman.
Dr. Bloor.
Spachuman.
Oh, yeah, also Dr. Spachemin, of course. Yes, Dr. Spaceman.
Yes. All right. So submit some paperwork, right? And this goes to the system. This goes to the dial. And the dial, it's an informal name, by the way. The dial can automatically approve a request, or it can flag it for further review. I think one thing a lot of people need to keep front of mind here is the dial, the AI powered algorithm itself, it cannot, as of yet, automatically deny a claim. It can only pop a flag and send it to a human.
Yep, you will hear that as like rhetoric coming out from people that rightly see major issues with this and talk about how things are getting automatically denied by this algorithm. But you're absolutely 100% right. It says that over and over in the investigation.
Yeah, look, where it is an important note, because we do have to be fair. Anything it flags as not entirely kosher gets sent to an internal team of Evacore nurses and doctors, some full-time, some consultants. Only the doctors can issue that actual final denial. But all along the way, depending on the nature of the contract, the conversations with execs and shareholders, people in Evacore can adjust the settings on the system. They can dial up or down what rates as an automatic approval.
Yep. Oh, and just to have Evicore's back a little bit here, guys, according to their videos that they put out, they let everybody know they only hire doctors for these purposes who are going to be doing the denials or approvals who have had medical experience, like actually worked in a hospital or some similar practice.
Oh no, so my ethics degree isn't going to let me get in there?
Yeah.
No? My
Sorry, pal.
underwater basket weaving PhD isn't going to work for this?
An ethics degree. All right. I wish more people had one of those.
It's
Philosophy major doctor.
exactly. Oh God, there's so many airplane jokes we could make. But anyway, okay, just one. All right, so somebody's having a heart attack. They're on the plane, and the flight attendant says, "Is there a doctor in the house?" Anyway, it goes in 100
I'm not a
different
doctor. I
directions.
just play one on TV.
There it is. So this algorithm gets that paperwork, it analyzes it, it assigns it what we could loosely call a likelihood of approval. Knowing what we know in the past, based on the guidelines that we have generated internally, how likely is this thing to be a yes? One request could get rated at 60 or 70%, and depending upon where the algorithm is set, maybe if it meets 70%, it gets automatically approved. Because now the argument would be fighting for that 30% possibility of being denied. It's not worth our time. It's not cost effective. But if the company wants more denials for a certain contractual relationship, they can dial that threshold up, like you were saying, Matt, to something around 90 to 95%. So anything under that likelihood gets flagged for review, and it goes to those internal employees, and the more reviews, the higher the chance of denial due to the nature of the internal guidelines.
This is just, it's so infuriating. And if you look at the outward statements for anyone who, is going to be talking about this, that has their job on the line, let's say who works for Evacore in any capacity or is in that chain anywhere from the healthcare company down to the physician, you can imagine that nobody is going to come out and say, well, I'm incentivized to deny the things that are even at 90%, 95% approval. I am incentivized as a physician working for Evacore to stop that from happening. Because if I stop that from happening, I'm going to keep my job. The company's going to make more profit. The healthcare insurance company is going to make more profit. And then somebody might have a big problem, with their health.
It's one of those things too, where it's just, they kind of tweak it just enough, it would seem, where it's not like you could trace doctors getting paid off or like an incentive of a bonus of some kind for denials. But in a roundabout way, what it amounts to is more or less that in terms of systematically the way this organization operates.
Yeah, because you can always say it's just for review, right?
Yeah.
We're not immediately saying no. And then, we should get into the controversy about the guidelines, but that's the thing. When this stuff goes to review, the chances of it being denied are much higher. And then also, you could argue they're foisting a bureaucratic burden upon the actual on the ground physician, upon the patient, anybody involved. Evacore has always said the system is built on continually updated guidelines, always based on the latest, most accurate research. And then they also say, they go a step further. They say, look, these guidelines are sacrosanct to us. They're part of the system. They're state agnostic. The same stuff gets applied for all states, all clients. Someone requesting an MRI in Vermont gets treated the same way someone requesting an MRI in Georgia would be treated. In short, they deny any and all claims, get it, of willful misconduct.
Hey, they deny all the claims. 100% deny.
They do, actually. Yeah.
Just another quick quote from that investigation about those guidelines. And this comes from, as we were saying, there are people inside the system speaking out, talking about what they've experienced. This comes from, they had to kind of mask it a little bit. This comes from an Evacore employee involved in the radiation oncology program. And the quote says, company executives, quote, would say, keep a closer eye on the guidelines for reviews for a particular company because we're not showing savings, unquote, for that particular company that they have a contract with.
And again, the argument from that perspective is due diligence, right? But that's a big umbrella, and you can put a lot of villainy under that umbrella. And I also want to point out another issue that does not come from Evacore, but we said Evacore is kind of the Coca-Cola. There are other brands in the game. One we could call the Pepsi would be under Elevance Health, a subsidiary called Carillon Medical Benefits Management. They had to settle a lawsuit in 2022 to the tune of $13 million because the courts investigated claims concerning tactics they would use to deny approval requests. And one of the most villainous and petty, like supervillain level of petty we found was this company has provably in the past set its fax machines to only receive 5 to 10 pages at once. And it did not tell the customers. It did not tell the physicians. What it would do is deny requests that were longer than the page count and say you didn't give us all the information. And so someone at the doctor's office refaxes the thing, and then they get the same message back, and they get back on the phone, and maybe eventually with some digging, they say, why is your fax machine like this?
Yeah. And a quick note on that little company from the investigation and just from general knowledge that we've learned on this show over the years. Elevance Health used to have a different name. What do we know about companies that have to change their name a couple times, once, twice, 3 times? I
was trying to come up with a joke about that earlier, and that's good, Matt. You did it. You got there.
They were Anthem back in the day.
They were Anthem. Yeah. Companies who look on this show, we always respect the preferred names and pronouns of individual people. But if you're a sketchy company, sorry, man, that first name's the scarlet letter. You earned it, Comcast.
Guys.
Oh, hey. Xfinity.
Clear Channel.
Yeah.
That's
all
us.
of them.
You know that, right?
I know.
Okay, just saying. I
think we should keep it on.
I think you're probably right, yo. Yeah.
No, I mean, for real, because the biggest one we talked about was back in the day. Remember that contractor business? Yeah. They changed their name at least 3 times.
The XE Academi.
Why did they change their name? It's just a rebrand, right? Oh, wait, no. There was this thing called WikiLeaks that showed horrific videos of their contractors doing things. So anyway.
Which continue today.
Yep. So just remind yourself every time you see that rebranding thing, just what does it really mean?
Yeah, you don't have to automatically deny the potential goodness of that corporation, but you should flag it for personal review and see what their likelihood of approval is on your end.
I'm seeing a 70% chance. Feeling
70%
good.
chance for chicanery. There are a ton of critics for this. It's pretty clear. We mentioned multiple medical organizations. They say the guidelines are kind of malarkey. And that's not just lobbying groups we're all familiar with, but it's things like the American College of Cardiology, the Society for Vascular Surgery, the one I didn't know, but I think we'll all love this one, the American Society for Radiation Oncology, or ASTRO. I think ASTRO is cool.
Pretty cool.
But the one thing these organizations all have in common is that they are experts in the conditions that this company approves or disapproves treatment for. These are the boffins. These are the eggheads and the experts, and they're the ones saying that the guidelines are crap.
Yep.
I just want to point that out. It's like it's different from. It's like if the three of us actually built Cybertrucks, or actually built pickup trucks and said we didn't like Cybertrucks. That's way different from us seeing one on the street in Austin and going, haha, that's goofy.
It is. It's very different. These are the people that actually know what they're talking about.
Have you guys seen a video of people using Cybertrucks as skateboard ramps? There's kind of the perfect use of them. And also, have we talked about the fact that they've recalled literally, I think, all of them because of this really dangerous metal strip that's just hot glued on and that will just fly off randomly? Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If you're trying to save cost and per unit manufacturing, you can use the wrong adhesive and just have a no refunds policy. But luckily, the U.S. still has something like recall laws.
Hopefully, healthcare doesn't deny your claim when that metal shrapnel flies off in traffic and slices your arm off or something.
Oh, man. Yeah, no kidding. There's another, let's talk about the contracts, too. There's another thing we have to mention. So in some of these deals, there will be an agreement where we said Evacore will guarantee a certain threshold of rise in denials, right? Or rise in efficiency or whatever they call it. They'll also do a little bit of glad handing and they'll say, hey, if there are claims that are not denied, then we will pay them. We, the company, will pay the cost of those in exchange for getting to keep any savings that we get beyond your standard expenses. This is part of the tricky and ethically fraught thing, the risk contract. They have a flat rate contract, they have a risk contract. It looks like it makes the system not as objective as it would appear to be. And that's not us saying it. That's folks like the former California insurance commissioner, Dave Jones, who has spoken about this multiple times, not just to ProPublica.
That's right. Apparently, doctors will sometimes be a bit more hesitant to send a request in the first place if they know the system is involved. The Evacore system. The claim will get denied no matter what in this case. And Evacore internally refers to this as sentinel effect or sentinel syndrome. Yeah, it sounds like something out of X-Men.
Well, because you don't want to, as the physician or, that care provider, you don't want to get singled out and say, this person keeps pushing through all these things we keep denying. Why are they being a problem?
Real pill.
Yeah, exactly. Real drip. And then there's the other side, the way this company will portray it, because they use the phrase sentinel effect as well. They'll say, think of it like how a sheriff comes to town, and now people are a little more on their P's and Q's. That's their argument. Again, your perspective may differ here, but this is the quick skinny. The U.S. healthcare industry is a leviathan by any means. And we mentioned it's the biggest employer in the country. Statistically, that means, you guys, that a lot of us in the audience tonight tuning in are employed by this industry in one way or another. And that means it touches everyone in this country. Even if you have never filed a claim, even if you are in perfect health, this will somehow reach you and your loved ones. So it's important for us all to ask, is this, knowing what we know now, is this genuinely a matter of reducing waste and making things more efficient? Or did these perhaps once noble intentions lead to a vast conspiratorial industry that is built to purposely prevent people from getting the care that, by the way, they pay for? They're paying for
That's
it.
the most vexing part of all of it when you start, even with these wildfires and things. Like, I think we all have friends and colleagues, of course, that lost things in those and lost homes or were displaced. And just the attitude, it would seem, of the insurance company to do everything humanly possible to deny claims. Especially after you've paid in all of this money, for so very long, and then you don't even get the thing that you've been paying towards. It's really, really disappointing.
It's baffling to see from Evacore's own website and their own statements from officials and board members and people who say things, they give you the value add, right? Anytime anyone's going to pay for a product or service, what is the value that this product or service has for me, the person who's buying it, right? In this case, it's the health insurance companies. And they're also, essentially giving a value add to the physicians and the care providers, saying, hey, we're going to remove a lot of that junk you have to do, all your busy work when you're getting these prior authorizations.
Yeah.
But ultimately, to me, it's trying to fix a problem that's created by this insane system that we've built. And every time we make these little changes to the American healthcare system, the private healthcare system, it is like putting Band-Aids on leaking pipes, right? Or pipes that have a gaping hole in them. We're trying so hard to fix something, but it just seems like, I don't know, guys, we've talked about it before. It seems like the only way forward really is to dismantle the thing. But if you dismantle the thing, as we said at the top of this, you're dismantling the largest, employer base essentially that exists out there.
Yeah, and it is a pickle. I always think it's best to think in terms of analogy, to the point about whether the system itself is inherently beyond repair, right? Is the car totaled? Think of it this way. Private insurance companies in this situation, just objectively, it is as though somebody owns a shoe store and they go to another company and they say, guys, these people who buy shoes, too many of them are walking out with the shoes they bought. Is there a way that we could, make sure like 15 to 20% of them don't leave with those shoes?
That's
evil.
That's evil to the core. And let's quickly point out here, Cigna Group, on their website, they boast about how they have 180.5 billion total revenues at last time they checked. Cigna Group, that's the people that own, it's Evernorth that then runs this whole system we've been talking about the whole episode.
And Cigna is using revenues in the plural correctly because they're adding up the revenue from every arm of their octopus.
Exactly, because they are the Cigna Group, not just Cigna Healthcare, which is a, international situation. But just think about that money that exists there, that money involved. And in the end, what is it for?
I thought you were going to go, oh gosh, I thought you were going to do the song.
I almost did. It's just, it's given, I don't know. It's given Mangione core to me. It's given Mangione core vibes. And you can see why.
Ooh, have we mentioned that they're seeking the death penalty with old Luigi?
That's how we're gonna wrap up. So yes, these two companies we mentioned, they did get in trouble recently, just about 2 weeks ago, a little over 2 weeks ago as we record on Friday, April 4th. And Anthem and Cigna got in trouble with the Virginia State Corporations Commission. They had to pay back hundreds of people, but they had to pay back peanut fees. And this further brings us to the context of Mangione. Because like you were saying, Noel, the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, just a few days ago, just like this Tuesday, ordered federal prosecutors to seek the death penalty for Luigi Mangione, who, as we know, is the man currently not convicted of gunning down United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson in New York City last year. He's 26. He's in jail. The population of the U.S. overall versus the power structure of the U.S. overall are deeply divided on this case.
Well, I think we could at the very least argue that he is sure as hell being made an example of.
Yeah. And he's also got an insane amount of support in the news. Also, this, I think it was this past week, maybe the week before you're hearing this, 2 weeks, he put out a statement asking people to stop sending in so many photographs.
Yes. Yeah.
because
SNL even talked about it.
Yes.
And none of us support violence. None of us support, this kind of thing. But it's interesting. It's an interesting bellwether as to how so many people feel about the healthcare system and how clearly broken it is. It's just really kind of kickstarted again the whole conversation around it.
Mm. Yeah, please check out our series on Luigi. We explore the motivations for his actions, which are related to the idea of denying healthcare. During the research for this episode here, I think we were all unsurprised, but still moved to find how deeply these stories tie together. We may be looking at a sea change. The Mangione case has exposed this great divide that always existed between the average American and those in power. And as we're recording now, we should also mention that he's got federal and state charges. So if state prosecutors bring their case first, he hasn't been federally indicted, then he could be imprisoned for life without parole or something to that nature. So that's still very much an evolving case. And in some points, it does seem like people would rather it be forgotten. I don't know. Maybe that's where we end. What do you guys think? What's going to happen next?
God only knows.
Well, I think this kind of thing only gets worse.
Yeah.
Because again, we're talking about trying to fix leaky pipes, but you've got whole sections of this thing that just don't even have any pipes, and there's just water filling up the submarine or whatever. But however you want to talk about it, it's messed up.
I think we should only talk about it in nautical metaphors, Matt.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm serious. I'm joking, but it's a really good one, Matt. No, I'm visualizing it, and you're absolutely right.
It's a sinking ship that is only serving the people who have lifeboats.
Thank you. See, thank you for continuing with the theme.
I want to talk about something that a friend of the show, Charlie, brought up to me, which was that in a lot of states, if you don't make enough money, you can get on that state-run Medicare program. But if you all of a sudden cross that threshold because you got a new job and now you're making a little more money, now you're required to get health care through, the marketplace.
Yeah.
You have to get health care there, which then those costs are in the hundreds of dollars. Before, you weren't paying any money for your health care if you're on a state program or, the federal program. Now you have to pay, which means you're actually going to be making a lot less money on a month-to-month basis because you have to now pay into the private system. Like, how is that an okay thing? And how does that incentivize people to not get a better job, right? And it's something we've talked about before, like this concept that's very popular in governmental speak is a human being living off the system or something like that, right? But we've designed a system that is going to punish people who aren't rich enough, right? Or it's going to incentivize people to make sure they don't get too rich. I don't know. It's just weird.
It is weird. It's an interesting way of looking at it, Matt. I mean, it's how it is.
Yeah. It's something we had discussed previously, as you mentioned. One thing that I think gets lost in a lot of the tribalization or politicization of things like that was calling the ACA Obamacare as a means of vilifying it for people who didn't like that administration, when in fact it was generated by Mitt Romney, very, very much as a conservative solution to the existing healthcare problems. Folks, this is where we're going to call it. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning in. I think it's always important for us to note, obviously, we cannot thank journalists like the good folks at ProPublica enough for this fantastic, truly disturbing work. We also know that a lot of us listening tonight work in the healthcare industry aren't villains. It's the system. It's like Stick said, it's deeper than skin. It's the system that they're keeping us in. Stickman from Dead Prez.
Of course.
Anyway, that's our gratuitous hip hop reference. We're gonna call it an evening, and we're off to Noctivigate. In the meantime, we can't wait for you to join the show. You can find us on An email, you can find us on a telephone, you can find us all over the internet, depending on how this episode goes.
That's right. In all of those places, you can find us at the handle Conspiracy Stuff, where we exist on Facebook. We have our Facebook group. Here's where it gets crazy on X, FKA Twitter, and on YouTube, where we have video content for your perusing enjoyment. On Instagram and TikTok. However, we're Conspiracy Stuff Show.
We have a phone number. It is 1-833-STDWYTK. When you call in, you've got 3 minutes. Give yourself a cool nickname and let us know if we can use your name and message on the air. If you've got more to say than can fit in a 3-minute voicemail, why not instead send us a good old-fashioned email? We are
the entities that read every piece of correspondence we receive. It does not have to be longer than 3 minutes. It can be as short or as long as you wish. Be well aware, folks, yet unafraid. Sometimes the void writes back. You may end up in a correspondence with us, just the way K-Dog was, which inspired this episode. So join us one step further out here in the dark. Conspiracy at iHeartRadio.com.
Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.